Okay, good morning and welcome. Today we're doing Mishnah 14, the third chapter of Pirkei Avos, the 14th Mishnah. As you remember from last week, the author of last week's Mishnah was the very famous Rabbi Akiva, and this is a continuation. So Rabbi Akiva is still speaking, which means that there has to be there's always a link between the preceding Mishnah and the next Mishnah. We've always found that throughout Pirkei Avos, but in this particular case, you're going to see a very intriguing link between the two Mishnahs. But the theme of this particular Mishnah is incredibly powerful. There is so much, it's literally jam-packed with information and insight. There's so many fundamental principles of Judaism that are encapsulated in this particular Mishnah that by rights, it's probably something we should spend a lot more time on. So you may leave today feeling a little bit dissatisfied. There's got to be more to the story. How do I learn more about the story? So the theme of this Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva basically telling us what is so unique about being Jewish, what the special blessing is of being a Jewish person. And he takes it from a variety of angles. In fact, it's 3 layers essentially that he describes. And because the theme over here is about how special it is, or to put it in the language of the Mishnah, how precious it is to be Jewish, so that fits directly from the previous Mishnah. Previous Mishnah spoke about the concept of siyagim, how you create fences to protect things, how you protect wealth, how you protect wisdom, how you protect tradition. So the logic says that the more valuable and the more precious something is, the more you'll invest to make sure to protect it. So that's the flow. Seeing as in the previous Mishnah he spoke about the need to protect things that are incredibly important, so now he tells us what's really most important. Even more important than wisdom, even more important than the tradition of Torah, is we ourselves. We are this incredibly important part of the whole creation, the purpose for creation. So let's take a look at the Mishnah. As I said, it's in 3 parts. It builds. It's an ascending concept, so it starts with what's, in a sense, generic. I don't want to use the word generic, but maybe more universal. That's a better word. Starts with what is more universal, and then it becomes more focused and even more focused. In each case, he uses the expression chiba or chavivin, and in each case, he uses a double expression. So effectively, what he says is, we are cherished by Hashem for the following reasons. And then there's an additional chiba, an additional love that Hashem shows us for a particular reason. So that's basically the theme and the structure of this particular Mishnah. 3 things. Hu haya oimer. We've already seen previously in Pirkei Avos that whenever it says hu haya oimer, it means this wasn't a once-off statement. This was a theme, almost like a mantra, a chorus of this particular rabbi. So this is Rabbi Akiva, hu haya oimer. He would always say the following teaching. Level 1. Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tselem. Man. Now, it's interesting because there are different versions of this Mishnah. We're going with the version that says Adam. There are other versions that say Ha-Adam, the human. Either way, humans are cherished. Humans are beloved to Hashem. How do we know this? Shenivra B'Tselem. Because we are created in the divine image. It is interesting that he says B'Tselem without saying B'Tselem Elokim, which would be the quotation from the verse, which is what he's going to say in the next part. But at this point, he says simply that we are created in the image. There's a huge topic right there. The image of Hashem. So we'll talk about it to some extent. Maybe it will actually occupy quite a lot of our conversation today. What exactly does it mean to be in Hashem's image? Then he says, Chiba Yesera, there is additional love or additional care or preciousness. Noida asloi shenivra b'tzelem. So there's an additional love that Hashem has made known to us, the fact that we are created in the divine image. And as the pasuk says, Ki b'tzelem Elokim asa es, here's the word, ha-adam. Because in the image of Hashem, the man, in other words, the human being, was created. So it sounds like what Rabbi Akiva is telling us is twofold. Number 1, we have this tremendous love, this tremendous preciousness to Hashem, which is illustrated by the fact that he created us in his image. And then that is doubled by the fact that he allowed us to know it. The sages tell us in the Gemara that if you give a person a gift, you are actually required to let them know that you've given them a gift. People think, be nice to be anonymous or whatever the case is, but part of giving a gift is actually to notify the person that you have gifted them. So in a similar vein over here, that's effectively what Hashem's doing. Not only does Hashem give us this gift, this amazing gift that we are in the divine image, but he allows us to know that such a gift exists. And there's a psychology to that, because if you know who your benefactor is and you appreciate how much they've done for you, then naturally you are going to feel that you need to give something back. And that's what Hashem wants over here. Hashem wants us to be in a situation where he gives to us a gift that invokes from us a sense of we need to give back. We need to be committed. We need to do things for Hashem. So layer one is that we are created in the divine image. Layer two. The Jewish people are precious because we are called Hashem's children. Now, that implies then that the first part of the Mishnah was not only speaking about Jewish people, right? That implies that the first part of the Mishnah was universal. Because the term Adam, or even Ha-Adam, the term human, is not limited to the Jewish people. In halachic terms, yes. When the Torah uses the word Adam, when describing an halachic principle, we know that it's referring specifically to Jewish people. But here we're talking in a more generic sense, in a more universal sense. Here, Adam could mean every human being. So, in the first part we said that if somebody gives you a gift, you feel psychologically, now you owe them something, you got to do something in response. What do you have to do? Well, the first and most obvious thing is you have to treat every human being with dignity. Because the gift that you were given is the same gift the next person was given, to be created in the divine image. And therefore, if you respect Hashem who gave you this gift, the way that you'll respect him is by showing respect to the people he put into this world. Whether they are the same as me, they think the same as me, they follow the same faith as I do, is irrelevant. Stage number two is to recognize that as the Jewish people we have an additional preciousness, namely that Hashem calls us his children. And what makes it even more special is the fact that Hashem alerted us to the fact that he considers us his children. Shenemar, as he said, via Moshe Rabbeinu to us while the Jews were in the desert, Bonim atem la Hashem Elokeichem, you are children to Hashem your God. So effectively what he's telling us is this: Tselem Elokim, the divine image, that is a gift that was given to the human being. It's a gift maybe that unfortunately, you know how it is with people. People, we have the capacity to look at somebody else and see the bad in them. Only humans are capable of doing that, right? To be able to see the bad in somebody else. Whereas the Torah tells us very clearly, that your fear will overtake all the animals of the field. So the principle as far as the Torah is concerned is that an animal looks at a human, recognizes that the human is B'Tselem Elokim, has the divine image, which an animal doesn't, and so the animal does not attack the human being. That would be the story of Daniel in the lion's den. What happened? Yes, you think of it as a huge, and it was a miracle. Absolutely it was a miracle. Yet the nature of the miracle is that Daniel was somebody who had Tselem Elokim, a very clear image of God on his face. Therefore, it's only natural that the lions in the lion's den can't touch him. Just like a lion would never obviously attack Hashem himself, when he sees the Tselem Elokim, he backs off. There's a similar story much more recently. When I say more recently, about 300 years ago, the story of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. For those people who know it, Rabbi Chaim Ibn Attar, very interesting story. He was traveling once long distance and he was part of a caravan, and he made a deal with the leader of the caravan that when it came to Shabbos they would stop. And the leader of the caravan reneged on the deal when Friday night came, and they continued traveling, and they left the Or HaChaim on his own in the middle of nowhere. And the story goes that he was obviously exposed, and there could have been robbers and who knows what. And the story goes that this big male lion arrived and sat with him the whole Shabbos and kind of protected him for the whole Shabbos. Why? What happened? Was it a miracle? Tselem Elokim. Person has the impression of Hashem on their face, the rest of nature is designed to recognize that and to defer. So now you'll ask the question, how come we don't find the same muzzle for people who get out of their car in the middle of a safari somewhere to take a picture of the lions, right? As happens over here sometimes in the Kruger National Park. How come they don't have the Tzelem Elokim? How come the Romans who threw who knows how many people to the lions and they got eaten by the lions? So the Gemara explains that there is no way that an animal can have the audacity to attack a human being unless the human being also looks like an animal. In other words, if a person becomes so involved and enmeshed in the physicality and materialism of this world, at that point, they don't look like Tzelem Elokim. So it is possible for somebody to lose their Tzelem Elokim, to lose that divine image. And how do you know they've lost it? Because the natural world does not automatically show them the respect that they deserve. So every human being on this planet has the ability to be Tzelem Elokim, to be a mirror of godliness into this world. And equally, every human being on this planet has the option through free choice to be able to lose that Tzelem Elokim. Therefore, Rabbi Akiva says, but when it comes to us and our relationship with Hashem, our relationship runs deeper. We are banim lamokoim. Even when nobody can see it on the outside, even if we lose the Tzelem Elokim, even if a Jew becomes so lowly and so crass and so enmeshed in the materialistic world, you're still the child. You might be the wayward child, God forbid, but you're still a child. You cannot undo that. So that's the next level. The next level is that by being Jewish, there's an intrinsic connection and an intrinsic love that Hashem has for us that goes beyond what we do or don't achieve by wearing or mirroring Hashem's Tzelem Elokim, the divine image. Now, if you think about it, the fact that we're Hashem's children is something perhaps you don't know. You know, we do, because we're in this world. We learn Torah, we encounter these things, we discuss these things. But there are many people in the Jewish world who are absolutely unaware of the principle that we are Hashem's children, you know, that it's a special relationship that we have. So the extra love that Hashem shows us is that He informs us that we are His children. Why? Think about it. What does it mean when you love somebody? How does it work when you love somebody? You want to have a connection with them. That's the nature of love. You want to connect. You want to have a sense of appreciation. You want them to realize how much you cherish them. So the fact that Hashem alerts us to this information only deepens that Chibah Yesera. It only shows us much more deeply how much Hashem loves us. And then layer number 3, Chaviv Yisrael shenitan lohem kli chemda. The Jewish people are even further cherished by Hashem, that He gave us His Kli Chemda. It's an interesting description. Effectively, what it's talking about is the Torah, as we'll see from the verse that he quotes at the end. But it is interesting that he calls the Torah Kli Chemda, which basically means a vessel of beauty or of pleasure. Something chamud, something that you find to be beautiful, something that is attractive. So it's interesting that he will describe the Torah over here not as the Torah. Just say it straight. Say that it's a great thing that Hashem did for the Jewish people, that He gave us the Torah. Why does He say Kli Chemda? We'll have to explore that. And then there's an additional degree of cherishing us, of caring for us, of loving us, that is expressed by the fact that Hashem tells us, I have given you not just a Torah, which is an instruction book, but you should know that this Torah that I've given you is something beautiful, it's something precious. Shenema, as the Pasuk says, Ki lekach toiv nosati lochem. I have given you a good set of lessons. Torasi al ta'azovu, do not abandon my Torah. Okay, so here you have it. You see that there are 3 components to this Mishnah. There's the component that speaks about the universality of human greatness, that every human is created in the divine image. There is the deeper level of love and cherishment, which is of us as Hashem's children. And then there's the deeper level when we choose not just to be his children, but to engage with his Torah. So you effectively get to choose three possible levels at which you could live. Either you could live at a level of just being a person, being a Jewish person, or being a committed Jewish person. And that's really Rabbi Akiva's message. It's interesting, some of the commentaries point out that there are three cardinal sins that we know: murder, adultery or incest, and idolatry. And so these three chibois, these three senses of how much Hashem loves us, are there to stop us from God forbid, getting into any of these behaviors. So when you realize Tselem Elohim, you realize that every human being is designed in the divine image, that is the greatest barrier to murder. Because how dare a person touch another human being? When you realize that we are all children to Hashem, then you realize that we are all born in purity. So how dare a person then engage in something that might produce a child in impurity? So that's what blocks us from Gila Aroyas, from inappropriate relations. And when a person realizes that the Torah is Hashem's ultimate, most precious gift that he gave us, as the Midrash says, a gift that he kept for hundreds of generations before he eventually shared it with the world, then you realize how much you have to stay away from idolatry, because any person who engages with idolatry, it is a rejection of the entire Torah. So effectively what we need to do now is try and understand these three levels more deeply. Let's start at the beginning, Tselem Elohim. It's a big principle. What does it mean to be created in the divine image? You've got to be so careful with this, because unfortunately over the course of the ages, because of the notion of a divine image, that's why people started to use icons to worship. Because they had them in their mind, what the divine image looks like. Whatever their particular view was. If the divine image had big eyes, or the divine image had big ears, because you want God to hear our prayers, or if you want, well, I don't know exactly. Everybody came up with these interesting things. So we've got to work out, what on earth do we mean when we speak about the divine image and that we're created in the divine image? I mean, what are we trying to say over here? We as Jewish people, are we trying to say God has a large nose? The divine image? We're created in the divine image. Is that what it means? What exactly are we trying to convey? So we understand very clearly that the idea of an image in Hashem's context doesn't really add up. Ein loy demusaguf, as the Rambam says, the Hashem has no physical features. So the tselem, this form that we're describing, is obviously non-physical. That's the first thing that we have to know. It's obviously non-physical. So clearly what we're saying over here is one of two things. Either we're saying, wow, amazing, we were created in the divine image, unlike what? Let's think about it. One option. Unlike, well, the logic says, unlike the animals that inhabit this earth with us. That's one possibility. We are different to the animals. Now, I don't think you need Rabbi Akiva in a Mishnah to teach you, wow, you know what? Humans are superior to animals. Yes, I know, many people will tell you that animals behave better than humans. That's a different story. But fundamentally, the concept of humans being superior to animals is a concept of the ordinary evolutionary pecking order of society. So is that what you need Rabbi Akiva to tell me? That we're greater than the animals? For which reason a number of the commentaries say that what Rabbi Akiva wants us to know is that we're greater than, option 2, we're greater than the angels. Yes, angels are far more spiritual than we are. And angels are far more insightful than we are. Far wiser than we are. Far more knowledgeable than we are. And yet, we're the ones who were created, B'Tselem Elohim, in the divine image, and the angels were not. Now there's a thought. So we have to try and decode over here. What do animals and angels have in common that humans don't? Because that will be a useful clue to understanding what this Tselem Elohim is. And we're going to identify two main areas in which we see that humans are completely different to both animals and angels. In fact, animals and angels are quite similar in this regard. So the first thing we'll look at is the actual tselem, the actual design, the anatomical design of a human being compared to the anatomical design of every other creature on earth. What is unique about the anatomical design of a human? We stand upright on two legs. That's unique about us. Yes, there are creatures that walk around also on two legs, but they don't stand upright. That means to say, if you had to look at the skeleton of all these creatures, whether it be, let's say, an ostrich, right? So you think of that, that's a two-legged creature that stands upright. It still doesn't stand upright in this single column as a human being does. And now this is really important. Why is it important? Because what it illustrates is every creature on earth at some point on a daily basis has to lower its head in order to survive. Interesting thought. So you go out into the bush and you observe creatures. It's fascinating. So for example, you observe giraffes. Incredible creatures, right? And they tower over everything else around them. But a giraffe, in order to survive, one of the things it has to do is it has to lower its head all the way down in order to drink. Needless to say, every other creature that isn't so tall to begin with, it has to lower its head in order to survive, lower its head in order to eat, lower its head in order to drink. Humans don't. Humans are the only creatures who can sit in a fully upright position, or even stand for that matter, and bring the food or whatever other life-sustaining elements they need up to them. What does that tell you? What does it show you about the difference between these types of creatures? Is that a human is a master over the world, whereas an animal, a bird, a fish, any other creature has some element of the world that is a master over it. So if you had a look at a food chain, even the apex predator at the top of the food chain could fall prey to humans. Now, I'm not here for a moment to justify the way humans behave or things like hunting and so forth, but it does illustrate the point. We have the power to dominate the entire world that we live in. If we do it appropriately, we make a better world. If we do it poorly, we destroy the environment and we cause animals to go extinct and whatever. But it doesn't change the fact that we have the power to dominate the world. That is Tselem Elokim, a being that can control the environment it lives in rather than being controlled by that environment. Now, obviously, in Hashem's case, it's absolute. In Hashem's case, Hashem is the absolute master with a capital M, the master over everything. Riboinoi shel olam, the master of the entire universe. We have it in miniature form. And that might be why, for example, when the prophet Yecheskel saw a vision of God and of the so-called divine chariot, one of the things that he describes is Demus Adam ala Kisei, that there's a feature that represents what looks like a human in the environment of Hashem's so-called throne or chariot. Why? Because there's something about us, not the physical features. There's something about our place in the universe that is similar to Hashem's place. Hashem has ultimate mastery, and we have miniature mastery. So that is an incredible gift that we were given. We are not the victims of our circumstances. We are not the victims of the context we live in. Animals might be. So if animals, for example, live in a place where there is poaching, they don't have the power to protect themselves from the poachers. So they become the victims of their circumstances. If animals live in an environment where the water source dries up, they don't have the capacity to redirect a river or to bring in tankers or whatever the case is. They're the victim of their circumstances. So the beauty of Hashem making us in His image is the beauty of saying, you have the power to influence rather than just to be subject to influence. In that way, we're greater even than the angels. The angels are not masters. They happen to live in a world that is more advanced spiritually than ours. They happen to be endowed with greater intellect than we are. They happen to be ahead of the curve from our vantage point. When we look up at the angels and say, wow, look at you guys. You have such insight. You have such connection to Hashem. That's all true. And none of it is of their doing. There is no mastery. Just as, for example, the lion may have been given the skills with which it can hunt and kill in order to survive, it didn't earn those skills, it didn't train. It's inherent in its nature. In the same way, the angels are given the skills to be able to recognize God and sing his praises and fulfill his mission flawlessly every single day of their existence. It's not their mastery. Which really brings us to the core of what it means to be created, B'Tselem Elohim, in the divine image. What is the core of the divine image? What is the one thing that Hashem has and only Hashem has? Literally only Hashem has. Free choice. And that's what we mean by mastery. Free choice doesn't mean free choice with every purchase. Free choice doesn't just mean that you are free to choose in some kind of a limited fashion. People say, like, for example, a parent might say to a child, it's your choice. Actually, it's not really the child's choice, because you've already set things up in a particular way that the child knows, if I choose wrong, there will be a consequence. That's not a free choice. Free choice means choice that is free of any external influence. When Hashem decided to create a world, why did Hashem decide to create the world? Because he decided to create the world. Not because a world is worth having, because there would be an external influence. And of course, Hashem doesn't gain anything because he's already infinite. So he cannot gain by having a world. It's not because there were going to be these cute little people running around, like trying their best to do mitzvahs, and that's really nice for Hashem. No, because Hashem is infinite. So you cannot add any value to him by doing what he says or behaving in a particular way. None of that. So what influences Hashem to choose to create the world? Nothing. He chooses. It's free choice. The uniqueness of a human is that Hashem gave us a gift that according to the laws of logic we should not be able to have. The gift of free choice. Most of our choices are not free. Whatever it is that people say about how they believe that they have so much freedom, especially in today's world. It's such an open world. You're free to do as you please, say as you please, define yourself as you please. It's all nonsense. None of that is free. All the great liberalism of our world is actually just about who happens to have the most popular influence at a particular point in time. That will determine how free we are to behave in a particular way. That's not free choice. Free choice is not because everybody says that at this point in time, the healthiest way to live is this particular lifestyle, so now I'm free to choose. No, I'm not free to choose. I've been brainwashed that that's the way to live. Most of life in the 21st century is the effects of being brainwashed by the media or by popular voices. Free choice really just boils down to moral choices. When you, this morning, decided what it is that you were going to wear today, that's not a free choice. The weather played an influence. The fact that it's this time of the year, the 9 days, so there's only a limited amount of things that you prepared in advance that you could wear. The fact that you might be in a particular mood, or a certain thing might be what you saw first. There are so many external factors that influence your choice. Person says, I choose to eat healthy. Yes, of course you do in the broader sense. But right now, when you go into your kitchen, that choice is limited to what you happen to have in your kitchen. That will determine your choice. Whereas a moral choice, specifically a choice around Torah and mitzvahs, that is free. Because at every moment I have a soul that allows me not to conform to the external pressures. In other words, I have a part of myself that allows me to still choose freely in spite of what's going on and in spite of how popular things might be. So you look at the forefathers, particularly you look at Avraham Avinu, and what was his first name, his first adjective? Ivri. Which, of course, people just render into English as Hebrew, and that misses the whole point. Ivri comes from the word Aver, the other side. Everybody lived on one side of reality with one set of morals, with one type of insight into how life should operate, and he chose to separate himself. He chose to behave differently. So every single human being on the planet is given free choice when it comes to moral choices. Chiba Yesera, the additional love and kindness that Hashem showed us is that we know it. That we're actually conscious of this element. That we don't just go through life thinking that we're the victims of our circumstance, but we have been taught through all kinds of channels that we have the ability to make free choices. And yes, that does come obviously with a tremendous responsibility. That's level one. Every human has the choice to keep the Tselem Elokim or to relinquish the Tselem Elokim. How? By the choices that we make. But once a person is a Jewish person, then Chiba Yesera, we get like another layer of love and care and cherishment, whatever the word is, from Hashem. What is that? Bonim. That we're like children. Because effectively when you say that somebody is a child, effectively what you're saying is that the connection the child and the parent have is a connection in your DNA. So let's say, for argument's sake, imagine there was a scenario, and these things really do happen. Imagine there was a child who was separated from his parents or her parents at birth. Now, what happens then is you could have years, possibly decades, of zero contact between the child and the parents. This child lands up being fostered or adopted by another family, grows up with that family, learning their family history, their family traditions, their code of conduct, their perspectives on the world. And decades later, in some kind of strange twist of divine providence, the person finds the biological parents. And now they come for this reunion, which is possibly one of the most overwhelming experiences that anybody can ever have. This reunion with people who physically brought a person into this world, but you have no connection with them. It's very daunting, very overwhelming. So they come and they meet, and a whole lot of things could happen. They may not even speak the same language. They may belong to completely different cultures. They may have a totally different socioeconomic status. They may have a totally different set of values. There might be nothing in common between the adoptive family, where this child has grown up and who this child has become, and the biological family, who the child really is. Nothing, no connection. Yet, everybody knows scientifically that if you had to take the DNA of this child, the DNA would match not the adoptive parents, but it would match the biological parents, meaning that there is something that is you that is part of the parent. It's not what you feel, it's not what you believe, it's not how you think, it's not what you enjoy. It is you. The part of you you can never get rid of. You cannot swap out your DNA at some point because you're dissatisfied with the biological stock that you come from. That's who you are. So Rabbi Akiva wants us to know and to appreciate that, yes, of course, we have the principle of free choice, and it's really important. Yet we have to know that we have a relationship with Hashem that cannot be undone by our poor choices. This is the fundamental principle of Teshuvah. Teshuvah is not just the fact that there's always a path back. It's the fact that it's a path back. It's the fact that it's a rediscovery, not an apology. The fact that it's tashuv, from the word to return, that it's going back to who you are inherently. That's what he wants us to know. Now, of course, as the Rambam says very clearly, a person can do teshuvah at any point in their life, and if a person does teshuvah, literally even as they draw their last breath, it is 100% effective, and the person can reconnect to their source, and everything's great, and it's like the child coming back to the biological parents at the end of life. But who wants to wait till the end? Who wants to wait till the last minute? So therefore, Rabbi Akiva says, Chaviv in Yisrael sheniten lohem kli chemda. The Jewish people are so special because we were given something by God. We were given something that he treasured. The Gemara in Shabbos tells us the story about how when Moshe Rabbeinu went up onto Mount Sinai to receive the Torah, the angels protested very loudly. What was their protest? How can a human being come here to claim, and the expression they used is chamuda genuza, this cherished, precious item that you, Hashem, have had hidden away, squirreled away in some Fort Knox for all of this time, and now you're going to give it to human beings. Why is the Torah called Kli Chemda? Why is it called a vessel of pleasure? So there's a fascinating insight into the human being. Humans are obviously layers and layers of depth. And depending on how well you know a person, that will determine how many layers of depth you actually get to appreciate about them. So, for example, most people that we interact with, we get to meet nothing of them. Let's be honest, right? You sit next to a person on the bus, you walk into a shop, somebody serves you from behind the counter. You don't really get to know them. So what's the level of interaction? How much depth is there? It's very, pretty action-based. The actions that they do, that's how much I know about them. The way the person sat on the bus, the way the person handed over the parcel when I got to the shop. That's about as much as I know. As you go deeper and deeper, you discover that a deeper dimension of the person, obviously, are the things that they say. And a deeper dimension is the things that they think. And a deeper dimension is how they feel. And a deeper dimension is how they see the world. Not just how they think, but their worldview, their understanding of the world. One of the deepest layers of a person is what that person really wants in life. We call this ratzon. It's possibly the deepest part of a human being that we'll ever really get to encounter. So, for example, when a person says, my wish, my life's ambition is to be a doctor and save sick people, to make a lot of money, although hopefully that's not the deepest ratzon that a person has, to be kind, to change the world, anything like that, now you know you're getting to the real person. Now you know you're talking their language. Mitzvahs are Hashem's ratzon. What is a mitzvah? It's what Hashem wants to be done. What He wants us to do. What He wants done in the world. All of those elements, all of those angles are relevant and valid. So what are mitzvahs? That's the expression of what Hashem really wants. You want to connect to Hashem? Do His mitzvahs. You want to connect to any person? Live part of their dream. That will connect you in a very deep and meaningful way to them. You want to connect to Hashem? Live His so-called dream, which is to do mitzvahs. There is only one element of the human experience, and it's designed that way because, as we said in the beginning of the Mishnah, we're designed in Hashem's image. So we have these components within ourselves to help us understand how Hashem, so to speak, operates. There's one thing within the human experience that is deeper than your deepest motivation. And what is that? Tainug. Your deepest satisfaction. Your deepest pleasure. Now, there's much pleasure in this world that is very superficial. Physical pleasures are usually very superficial. And that's why they're transient, and that's why people are always looking for the next big thing, and they're looking for new excitement, because at the end of the day, physical pleasures never satisfy deeply enough. But there are certain pleasures in life that are so meaningful, so deep, so pleasurable, so satisfying that they make life worth living. For example, nachas. The pleasure of nachas that a person gets from a child or from a grandchild is so deep, it's so profound, it is so fulfilling that it makes it like life is worth living. Life is worth living for that. So tainug, the deepest kind of pleasure that a person could possibly have, illustrates who the person really is. So if, God forbid, you had some kind of wacko, misguided person who got pleasure out of causing pain to other people, that would tell you what a rotten person that is. Whereas, lahavdil, a person who gets pleasure out of helping people, that tells you what an amazing person it is. Look how much joy, satisfaction, fulfillment I get from what? From helping somebody else to feel good, to improve their life. What is the Torah? The Torah is Kli Chemda. The Torah is where Hashem finds, so to speak, His pleasure. The most satisfying thing in the entire creative process is when people learn Torah. Doing mitzvahs fulfills Hashem's ambition for the world. Learning Torah means we align with what Hashem loves. When I learn Torah and I enjoy learning Torah, I'm enjoying what Hashem enjoys. I'm deriving pleasure from what gives Hashem pleasure. So in other words, people think always that learning Torah is about knowledge and learning Torah is about insight. It's all true. But the real depth of Torah is that I should have tainug, pleasure from what Hashem has pleasure. That's the goal of Torah. Now what's interesting about it, of course, is you'd think, as the angels did, that the best place to learn Torah would be in Shamayim, in heaven, because that's where you can really appreciate it. Then you can really have the pleasure. There are not the distractions of this world. You don't have the limits of getting tired or getting hungry or having to go to a meeting or whatever the case is. You could just learn Torah in a never-ending shiur and it would be absolutely beautiful and amazing. Why did Hashem decide that the Torah should dafka be experienced, dafka on earth, dafka with all the limitations of the human experience? So let's take a slightly different angle on the punctuation of the last part of the Mishnah. The first way we've read it right throughout the Mishnah is that the Jewish people, or humans in general, were given this extra kindness or goodness from Hashem by the virtue of the fact that Hashem let them know that they're created in His image, that they are His children, etc. But you can read it slightly differently, and it's very relevant at this point in the Mishnah. Chiba Yesera Noidas Lahem, period. Chiba Yesera, a special love was shown to them. Who's them? The Jewish people. Full stop. Therefore, Nitan Lahem Kli Chemda. That's why they were given the Torah. You have a look. It's a very famous Rashi at the beginning of the Torah that it says Bereshis. Bereshis in the beginning could also be read as base, the letter base, which has the numerical value of 2, and Reshis, which is the word that means beginning. And so Rashi quotes from the Midrash that it means that there are base, Reshis. There are two things that the Torah refers to as Reshis, and they are the purpose for which the world was created. One is the Torah, and the other is the Jewish people. Asks the Midrash, so between the Torah and the Jewish people, which takes precedence? It says simple. Open up the Torah and you'll see. The Torah says, Tzav es b'nei Yisrael, daber el b'nei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people, instruct the Jewish people. That implies that the Jewish people were already a consideration even before the Torah was given, and the Torah is there to facilitate the Jewish people. What's Rabbi Akiva teaching us in this Mishnah? The Torah is beautiful, absolutely. The Torah is profound, absolutely. The Torah is an expression of divine, not only wisdom, but pleasure, 100%. But why is it given to us? Hashem wants us to know that we have a certain preciousness in His eyes that is even more precious than the Torah. That's why He was willing to take the Torah, skip over the angels who live in this pristine, beautiful, spiritual environment, and give us the Torah here on earth, knowing that a lot of the time we won't pay it the attention that it deserves. It's okay, because He loves us even more than He loves His Torah. That's why Kli Chemda Nitan Lohem, the treasure is given to those who He treasures. No different, I suppose, from a person who's got something which is really, really important and precious in their lives. Who do you give it to? The person you love the most. And that's Rabbi Akiva's message for us. Every human being on the planet is in a divine image and therefore responsible to make healthy moral choices. Being Jewish means that we're a child of Hashem, which means that even if we mess up on those choices, there's an easy path back. And the fact that Hashem was willing to take His single most precious item in the world and give it to us should only highlight to us how much He loves us. And we should never fall into the trap, as sometimes we do, of thinking, Hashem doesn't care about me, Hashem has turned His back, or all these other strange thoughts that do come into our heads. This Mishnah is healthy to help remind us, well, He loves us enough to have taken that thing that was most valuable to Him and entrusted it to us, that is the greatest vote of confidence and the greatest show of love.